Yo, yo, yo.
What's going on, Matt?
I apologize. I was in the middle of writing a marketing email and I got in a trance and just didn't even hear the email go off.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all. I just wanted to make sure I got a hold of you because you generally beat me in here all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at quarter till and I was thinking I should go, but I was just, next thing I know, it's 10 after. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. I'm just pulling up on an email what we were going to talk about here, um, and we can kind of go through it. I didn't have anything that you sent over. There it is. You sent over the guide down below, right? Okay. Did you send Nick the guide, Matt?
I don't think if Nick probably needs to sign up and register for the scouting report
Hmm.
to get it for free, but
Okay.
I can't sign him up, but he can log in, he can get his own login.
All right.
No, I don't think I did.
Gotcha.
I will though.
Well, let's pull up new home sales and talk about them today. Then we can
Okay.
start there. That was the one report that I saw that came out. I sent Nick a copy of that. See if he can pull that up on there. On the it looks like it was up 1.1% third month in a row. It was up. I guess that's a positive sign that we are potentially bouncing off of a bottom in new home sales, even though it's probably about as good of a bounce as me trying to slam a basketball, where I can get about that much air underneath my feet.
Are you on the short goal or the 10-foot goal?
I'm on the short goal, the one that used to be at Foot Locker.
That's right.
But again, with that said, existing new home sales, mortgage applications, all that, I think are maybe showing a light at the end of the tunnel. Isn't a freight train? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think you got to put it in context. I mean, it's all the good news about all the housing good news that came out the last week was 100% attributed to lower interest rates in January.
For sure. I think we can say that for sure is one big
That was it.
contributor.
That was a slam dunk. Now, so going forward, does that mean lower interest rates are going to be the impetus or the catalyst to keep the housing market going? Well, maybe so, unless it's a interest rate crash because of banking crisis. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like you can't say interest rates is the cure all for everything. It depends on the circumstances in the context in which it happens. And it sounds like to me that we actually are slipping into a more potentially deeper problem than we started the year with. You know, higher interest rates is one thing, but now having to lower rates so because we're doing too much, the banks are in trouble. I just find it hard to believe that the medium-sized banks have a problem that the large-sized banks don't have. There's got to be something systemic about the whole thing that if it's an oversight because they don't have the regulation in the medium-sized banks they do in the larger banks. I guess I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I kind of think if something can go wrong or somebody can cheat you, they're probably going to do it. And
well, think about this. I was at my bank yesterday, which is a larger bank, going over some of my stuff. And basically what I told them is, the Fed's raised rates, so it makes no sense for me to keep money in your bank. I can go over to the treasury.gov. And because the Fed's raised rates, I can have the government pay me an interest rate that some of it is non-taxable. Why should I keep my cash in your bank since it makes no sense?
yeah, and run the risk of losing it all.
It's the whole point. So I think when you see that happening, again, I'm not an economist, so this is just my thought. The Fed raises rates. Guys like me are like, why do I keep? I mean, people a lot smarter than me and woke up to this a lot earlier. I'm like, why don't I just put my stuff over in treasuries and stuff like that right now and pull it out of the bank?
Yeah, I don't know. I saw the same thing with some investment funds you're talking about that could be 100% protected. And right now, the government's kind of implying that everybody's deposits are protected, but they're not. They're only protected $250,000. And some of these companies they've got tens of millions of dollars in the bank just to make payroll, and that's not.
But those are, if I heard this right, they're only protected at those banks that the Fed said they protect. Other banks aren't guaranteed over 250,000 right now. That was
Yeah,
just the
and
banks.
how do you get away with that?
So
Like you
every time a
don't
bank is potentially going to, every time, again, this is just what I understand. If anybody wants to comment differently, if a bank is going to fail, they all meet and vote whether they're going to do it for that bank. So I think people think it's for every bank. It's not.
Well, you think about that. That can't possibly work.
Exactly.
You're gonna have, what if you protect Bank of America and Goldman Sachs, but you don't protect Wells Fargo or
Well, but all the banks pay for it.
yeah, and all the banks pay for it, which is all the banks charging us for it for fees for it.
So if that's the way I understand it right now. So when you see that going on, we potentially have, how is that going to affect housing? Well, a lot of these small banks have mortgages in them. And I think I read somewhere last week where a bunch of these smaller regional banks do a significant amount of commercial and residential lending, right? So we really need them in the system to do that. I am a big believer, and I said this yesterday, is I'm not picking any political sides here. Smart people will come together and figure this out because we kind of have to, right? It's
and who are the smart people? The smart people, the top 1% rich people that
well, yeah,
they're just considered smart because they have the money, or they can just
yeah. I think at the end of the day, there's smart people that are academically smart, and then there's people that got a lot of money. And
yeah, it's not the same people.
That may be why some people fly their planes into Omaha, Nebraska every now and then to consult, right?
Could be just to see what
you see. But so anyway, I think we're seeing things working a little bit better in the in the new. The one thing that I'm positive about, these big home builders, I think, are doing everything that they need to be doing to move inventory and not overbuild, if that makes sense. I think they have relatively decent price land. I think they have decent cash in the bank and the ability to do what they need to do to get people into these homes. And I guess maybe that's why new home sales have been. This is the third month in a row that they're up. They're not breaking any records, but maybe that's. I'm trying to look for the positive out of this whole thing, Matt. If that makes sense.
It's interesting that Jerica and I were talking this morning, and she said it's interesting to see when we have our small group meetings, how everybody's in agreement about what the market's going to do, but then you listen to the media, it seems to be completely different from how they're positioned. Because, and I wonder if how many of our members or readers or followers are following advice just because I say so, and I hope that's not the case. I hope they're making up their own decisions, but it seems like that everywhere I go, everybody's talking about how good business is, how much better it was in January and February, maybe a little slower to start March, but it's certainly not bad. And then you look at lumber that just can't seem to get out of the chute and get going because it's curtailed and still overproduced. It just kind of goes to show you that the market has to be in an accumulation mode, or buyers have to be in an accumulation mode to have a bull market. We have to be buying more than we're selling for the market to be in a bull market.
That's a great point, Matt. And I was talking to a buddy of mine last week at a big retail yard, and pretty simple point, but one I keep forgetting about. The past 2 years, for most of our trading life, Matt, most big retailers that sold big home builders did a 90-day lock with a 30-day kicker. So basically, they were having to guarantee prices for 120 days.
Right.
When they were guaranteeing prices for 120 days, generally, a lot of them, what they would do is buy 33% or 50% of it, put it on the ground, roll the rest of it in transit, and then take a flyer on some of it. Generally, or it was a third, however you want to look at it. Had it on contract too, where they were just paying a print price every week where they had it delivered. In the last 2 years, that changed. Nobody wanted to do that, and everybody, all of them, decided we're not doing that. We'll give you 30-day pricing, and some of them have a 60-day kicker. So think about that. Before, you had yards that had to have a 120-day guaranteed price in a rising market. And now they're down to a 60-day max exposure in a market that we can arguably say is still overproduced right now.
Right.
With that said, like you said, unless there's inventory accumulation, we're stuck in a range now. We are seeing the higher cost regions, unfortunately, having to curtail high cost mills. And we're going to continue to see that until this gets worked, as you and I have seen our whole life, rinse and repeat, Matt. Once you make, it never fails to amaze me at how much lumber we can produce when things are good and how long it takes to take it off when they start coming back, because there's a cost to taking it off.
Yeah, I keep thinking, I have this analogy that I imagine, like, you know how when you're standing in a pool and the water's, you're 6'2" and the water's at 6 feet.
Yeah.
And you tip your head back and you get your nose just out of the water. And that's what the mills are. The mills are just keeping their nose out of the water. But as the water gets higher, they get up on the tiptoes a little more. If it gets a little lower, they go down to tiptoes. But they're not going to go all the way underwater or all the way throwing their head out of the water. They're going to keep production just as close as they can to demand. And the only way to know what that is what you did last month or last week or yesterday, whether you sold production or not. I've had more mills tell me this week that they sold yesterday's production as though that was a great deal.
Well, think about it, and with the way that retailers are buying right now, and people are buying like what we just talked about. The other side of that is exactly what you said. They kind of have to be in the market all the time. It's not buying as much, but they have to be in the market all the time. This same person I was talking to said that they this year have been in the first quarter getting out of a lot more of the contracts they had relative to the past 2 years. And we've talked about that before too, right? So they're in the open market more.
Yep.
One thing I've noticed, a trend I've noticed too, and especially in the Southern Pine Mills, when you call them and ask for your price for their pricing, they all say that we're print. We're print. Yeah. We're print.
Print or print plus.
So
print plus 20, yeah.
I guess what like are they trading at that, or is that, I guess maybe to somebody
I don't
like
know.
me?
My numbers in Random Lake Southern Pine numbers are way different.
Yeah.
Here, and I'm getting mine. I don't know where they get theirs, but I'm getting mine from guys that are buying lumber in the field every day. And mine are a lot lower than Random's.
Well, I'm wondering because that's an easy answer for somebody to say I'm print, but I guess, in a mill's defense, they want to hear what you want to pay too. So when you get numbers from people that are actually paying, it's a different deal, right?
Yeah, they're gonna in what the mill's gonna hear back is no, I need less 20 or less 50. Yeah. If you're going to put it in a box, then there's my box too. I'll take it less 20, less 50, or yeah, we'll take it at print or whatever. But it's still a benchmark. You got to play with it.
Yeah. Well, the one thing we said is there's going to be a lot of people in the market now on a regular basis, albeit buying less, but they're going to be in there all the time, keeping things steadily moving. That's why it doesn't surprise me sometimes when a mill said I sold my production for this week, because we may be down into that kind of market. The one thing that I'm hoping for, and I think is going to happen, is maybe if we do go to a slowdown, lumber and housing was the one thing that really took it on the chin in 2008 and 9. Maybe it's going to be completely different, where this is the one quote unquote bright spot, kind of moving through where everybody else takes it on the chin this time, right?
Well, if you kind of think about it too, I just the dates just hit me when you said that. We've been talking about a housing market that's been underbuilt for the last decade. That's 5 years after 2008. Yeah. So yeah. we weren't underbuilding during that recession of the 2008 housing crash. We were actually short on housing, and then we came out of that with such fear that we just kept building short supply, and then we just didn't keep up with the demand of the growth of the population and needs and whatever. Now we find ourselves in a hole. So yeah, when we come out of this, we're not going to be in a supply and inventory abundance position. It's going to be more of a shortage. For sure. And again, we see these cycles all the time, and then we're back off to the races again. I always have this question. I've got to dig into the details more on this. Everybody since I've been in the industry it's almost like flat earthers, right? Everybody tells me we're underbuilt. And I listen to it, but like, where does everybody live then if we're underbuilt? Yeah, they're under the bridge with their bag full of cash. Down in the van down by the river. Yeah, sleeping with their bag full of cash. So no, I guess my question is,
I think when you look at demographics and immigration and all that, I can see the argument why we're underbuilt, but I always have to go back to common sense and say, if we're so underbuilt, where's everybody currently living? Because they're not all living in parents' basements. That's why multifamily is doing so good and all that, because they're finding it the easiest, most inexpensive place to live, right?
Yeah, no, my daughter, for example, is 32 years old. She's a teacher or a guidance counselor at school, and she lives with two other girls in an apartment, and they're 30 some years old, and they're not married. They're dating, but they're not starting families. So there's a big, I think there's a lot of folks that are in their 30s that still haven't taken this step into adulthood and responsibility of owning a home. I saw a thing and not too long on TV last week. There's a girl up in New York that was making six figures. She was 32 years old. She was living at home with her mother. She said, I'm thinking about moving out and buying something, but it's going to cost me $2,000 a month. So I'm waiting for something better. So they're still just hanging around mooching off mom and dad.
Yeah, look at it. I mean, I get it. I think one of the things right now is it's affordability, right? I was reading somewhere the other day, since we're just chewing the fat here, about, a guy in a condo complex. He's been renting, and I know it's different in every region, but he said it would be more for him to buy it than he's renting it for. And he has the flexibility as he can leave whenever he wants. So it's like,
Yeah.
I think, and I think it's an affordability thing too. I mean, things ran up pretty freaking high relative to where people bought houses over the last few decades relative to income too. So, I mean, I see what she's saying as far as how much it costs. It's a lot of money, or what your daughter's saying. It's a lot of dough to invest in a house now.
A guy reminded me in one of on our shows. He said, I keep throwing up my 18% interest rate. He said, wait a minute. How much did you pay for that house in 1967 or 1975 when you bought it at 18% interest, and it was versus what it is today? The house is 4 times expensive as it was then.
Yeah. I saw a similar comparison. In the '60s, like the average income was like $6,300, and a house cost like $24,000, right, or something like that, right? So, or maybe less than that. I don't have the exact numbers, but yeah, I see the point.
That house that I bought for 18% interest rate was $67,000. I looked it up when about a few months ago on Zillow to find out what it's worth. It was worth $465,000.
Wow, that was your first house?
That was my very first house. Yeah, same in Temple Terrace, Florida.
What was your payment monthly?
Seems like it was less than $400.
That probably felt like a reach back then, didn't it?
No, but I was a lumber trader. I was rolling in it though.
Gotcha. So look, I didn't have anything specific I want to talk. I wanted to talk about that. We talked a little bit about the banking stuff going on. What do you see over the net? One thing I did want to talk about is everybody keeps bringing up this topic on euro, since it's not really reported on a print price. And it is. Yeah, well, I said, and you're kind of doing that now. What have you as you've been recording those prices? Have you seen any interesting trends in them over the last few months relative to other stuff?
Yeah, it seems like there's a disconnect between, in my opinion, the disconnect between euro and everything else that's going on in the States, because it's selling for whatever it has to sell for to keep moving, and lots of times that's $30 to $50 under Western or Eastern SPF, but it just seems to be so inconsistent. It's like one guy said today, he said, if it's on the ground and somebody wants to move it, it'll be $50 cheaper than a guy who just got the very same stuff in on a boat last week. He doesn't feel the urgency, but it's the same product, came from the same place, sitting on the same dock, and it can be $50 apart on price just because of the urgency to have to move it. But it appears to me, though, that there's I think David Stalk was telling us last week maybe that the boats in April are going to be fewer than they were in January, February, March. But right now there seems to be an ample supply coming, but it's kind of got a mind of its own.
Yeah, you know what? I've only seen more lately, so I keep hearing, you know how we used to always hear about the wall of wood or the wall that wasn't going to come, or it never works out like that, does it?
Never comes. No.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate what else is your does Layman's Guide have going on? Do you have any more meetings coming up this week? Anything that you
We've
want to
got
tell me?
we got our monthly roundtable coming up next Friday, which ought to be pretty exciting because got some good guests coming on and a lot of good participants. But that's the purpose of that is just for dialogue between the members to they're getting more comfortable talking to each other and revealing what they're really doing. So I'm kind of it's kind of an evolutionary thing. So I'm kind of watching. There's about 500 folks that could potentially be there. So I think the first time we had 55. So we'll see what happens. But again,
So
that's
what is the theme that you're seeing in these with whatever you can share now versus maybe what it was a year ago when you did them? What is the interesting thing the take back that you're seeing that you may not have seen coming a year ago, or the little tidbit that is why people should go to this?
I think the thing that I see consistently is an overwhelming lack of confidence or belief in the entire economic system. And what I'm looking for is a change in that sentiment. And it's still not. It's still. People were more bullish last year this time than they are this year. And it's likely because we got all the economic curves in and all the things that are banking crisis on the horizon. The China and Russia chatting with each other like they're best buddies, and there's a lot of things to be concerned about. I mean, we had COVID to be worried about before, but now there's rather than one big COVID thing, there's you got economy, war, elections. There's a little pile of stuff that just seems to keep that uncertainty there, and I think the masses in general expect that there's another shoe to fall, and they just don't want to be there when it does. They'd rather run the risk of running out of lumber than having too much and something bad happen.
I think you're right. I think there's this underlying. Well, there is an underlying uncertainty, and you and I know what happens when there's an uncertainty in this business. People don't go out and put a pile of wood in their yards.
No, which means the market is going to have a difficult time getting overbought and topping.
Yes, that's a good point.
So it's almost the opposite of what you think. Well, does that mean because everybody's bearish that we're not going to do anything? No, it just means they don't have confidence that they have a doubt or a fear that something else might happen, but they don't have any evidence that it's happening because the business is still good. When you turn on the TV and you hear all the negative things and Dow's down another 500 points and other banks on the ropes, and just enough to make you a little skittish. So I think
I had somebody tell me the other day too, Matt, and I brought this up like you just said. I'm like, hey, why aren't you building an inventory? Are you thinking about it? And the answer was, I don't have to right now because I have my 5 and now 10 people calling me, asking me if I can help them move this. Or, I mean, so before for 2 years, you never got any incoming calls. When you're sitting there as a buyer at a yard and you get all these incoming calls, you just naturally in your head think to yourself, I don't have a problem today, and I probably won't tomorrow getting inventory that I need. And every time somebody calls me, it's less.
The buyers these days need to be aware that they're not order givers. If they're not getting trained or getting experience in being a lumber trader, then where they know what's going on every day, what's going on with the mills. I was just doing a series of emails to builders talking about how builders are the last ones to get the information, and the reason is the middlemen in the middle between the pro dealers and the contractor yards. They gotta have some kind of advantage to be able to sell the stuff at a profit. So they're naturally going to withhold some of that information until they get themselves positioned involved. Then they go back and tell the builders, "Oh, the market's running now. You need to get some orders in."
Yeah, good. That's a good point. I think we're starting to see that lag and that latency between the producers and some of those end users. I think you're helping with that, showing some transparency there. And some of these builders, as you know, some of them that you talk to are getting a lot smarter at the way they buy stuff. And
yeah, they're having the thing is, I think the thing that's happened with builders too is they're realizing that if you want to save money and make money on lumber, you've got to work at it. You can't just say, "Here's my list," and you give it to your same couple or your same one building supply and say, "Here's my jobs. Give me a takeoff, and I'll give you the PO."
Yeah,
they've gotten real smarter about trying to time the market with cycles and realizing that I think the builders are realizing that they've got little bigger stick than they had in the past. But unless you again, if you're not going to be a lumber trader, you're going to get your hat handed to you. So
Yeah, well, it's a good point. I'm actually writing an article for a magazine right now for these big builders and or big corporations. And what I'm finding out is most of these higher ups in the C-suites don't know how the sausage is made. When I mean how the lumber is bought for their projects.
yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm getting ready to do I have a mailing list of 3,000 C-suite builders.
That's awesome.
And I want to find out what I'm looking for to find out how in touch are the C-suite people with what's really going on, because these emails are going to, these correspondences are going to be an enlightening thing where they're things that their buyers might know, but they may not know.
You know, it'd be interesting to do, Matt. While we're thinking out loud here on something like that with big C-suite buyers or C-suite people, is you ask them 4 questions on a poll and to find out how much information they actually, how much they actually know in some real simple, non-probing poll of how much they actually know how their lumber is being purchased, right?
Yeah. Are you aware? Do you know how much per square foot it costs you to frame a house?
Exactly. What kind of lag time do you have? How many people do you have in it buying it? That type of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys they just put a lot of trust. Some of these bigger builders have like 25 buyers, 40 buyers. I mean, they're just regions all over the country, and they're kind of autonomous. They're left alone to do their own thing. And a lot of times, some of these guys just come from other industries or other places within the company, and they don't have the experience, and so they end up doing it the way the old guy did: just get the takeoff, pass it out, give the PO, and
here's what I found when I've had the CEOs, CFOs call me from these big companies, and they set up a conference call with everybody. They're like, "Hey, we'd like to know how we're buying our lumber. We don't know. I'm going to set it up with our GC, with all these other people." And they all of a sudden you get on a call. It could be a Teams or a Zoom, and you have 7 people on there, right? And you got the CEO and the CFO, and they're just excited, and they set the call up. And then you got 2 guys sitting like this. And right away I point and I'm like, well, there's the guys that are buying the lumber, right? Because they don't want to get input. They all of a sudden don't want any input. They don't want to say anything. And it's interesting. And many times when I do it, I can just look at them again. I can't read people's minds because I'm not a mind reader, but I can tell who we're disrupting. Right?
Yeah, who's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. But anyway, good conversation. We kind of went off in a different direction, but I think albeit it was pretty good.
Good. Anybody have any questions they want to ask us?
Yeah, anything on the viewers want to ask at all? Let me just put something here.
Or does anybody have any secrets they're sitting on they need to share with the class?
I think what we'll do next week, Matt, is we'll try getting on early again and firing it up like that, because that worked good a couple of weeks ago when we did it, or 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thanks for showing up. We'll look forward to doing this next week.
Have a great weekend. Thanks.
Bye.
See you.